Today we are talking with women about medical mysteries that can be difficult to diagnose. Our next guest, Meghan O'Rourke, battled what she calls chronic invisible illnesses for decades. Her personal journey inspired her to write the New York Times bestseller. It's called The Invisible Kingdom, Reimagining Chronic Illness, which was named one of the best books of 2022 by NPR, The New Yorker, Time, and Vogue. Here's an excerpt of her story.
For a year, every night around 2 a.m., I would wake up in a sweat to find hives covering my legs, leaving me itchy and wide awake, my pajamas and sheets so wet I had to change them. Doctors prescribed a daily dose of antihistamines. There was a test that suggested lupus, and then a follow-up that showed nothing was wrong. My lab work looked fine. The tests were all negative. It's just one of those things that will go away, a specialist told me. I remember thinking, don't you want to know why I have severe hives?
It wasn't until years later that Meghan finally got a diagnosis of multiple autoimmune diseases and late-stage Lyme disease. Please welcome New York Times bestselling author Meghan O'Rourke. Meghan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
This started right after college for you, and you describe feeling like a problem patient.
Yeah.
And I hear that so often from women who say, I didn't want to have to call again or question because I didn't want to be seen as a problem patient. And you felt that.
Oh, absolutely. I also was very young, right? I was 21 years old, and I had been raised to think that doctors were experts, which they are. And it was very hard for me culturally and personally to kind of keep asking questions and saying, I know you've said the tests say there's nothing wrong, but I'm having this roller coaster of symptoms. And I would come to them with all my symptoms and all my labs, and I could see their exasperation as I accumulated more and more information. And I learned very quickly, and I wonder, I'm sure other guests of yours have talked about this, to kind of hold back symptoms and only present the most extreme, the one I was most worried about.
In the book, you talk about how common it is for women to feel that they are being dismissed, especially when their symptoms don't show up in standard tests. You call autoimmune diseases invisible illnesses because there is not a standard test. We're used to going, I'm gonna get a blood panel and see what the, that's not the solution here.
Yeah, our tests are not where they need to be yet for autoimmune diseases. And so in my own case, it took more than a decade, if you can believe it, for any doctor to come and do enough testing to see that the autoimmune disease had finally shown up on that test. And this is a real problem because we're living through what some experts describe to me as a silent epidemic of chronic invisible illnesses, especially autoimmune disease.
Why is that? Why are they seeing this?
They're still studying it, but they believe that they're mostly happening in Western countries, and so they believe that it has something to do with the environment writ large, right?
Yeah.
Whether that environment is our food system, whether it's chemicals around us, whether it's stress, whatever, there's a whole set of explanations that we're still searching for answers.
Part of this conversation is trying to distinguish between feeling dismissed and things that are hard to detect. How do you draw the line?
I think one of the challenges is that we have an incredible medical system that's really good at dealing with acute care and what it knows well. But what happens if you live in a body at the edge of medical knowledge, right? And what happens if medicine hasn't learned enough about women's health, right? Then you can easily be either go undetected or dismissed. And there's two harms there, as it were. One is that when your test goes undetected, you might still have a doctor who is actively engaged in finding answers, but when you're dismissed, your condition becomes invisible and meaningless, right? There's like a second kind of loneliness where you're suffering, and how can you get care if no one even knows or believes that you're sick, right?
You wrote in the book, for me, the hardest part was not being comprehended or not believed. In those months, I was lonely in a way I never had been before. It is fascinating because you said it's a long process, and I listen to my audience and I hear people going, and I hear people feeling heard and represented without having met you before. This became a New York Times bestseller because people by the masses are experiencing this. That's the thing.
It's shocking. We know less about women's health. We also it's very hard for medicine to deal with these bodies at the edge of medical knowledge. We know too that studies show women of color, it's even starker when it comes to women of color, right? There's a study of cardiac problems, people coming to the emergency room. Women are half as likely to get the diagnostic test they need to get, right? And then another study I looked at next to it found that women of color were even less likely to get that test. Right. So we really need to believe in the lived experience of people's bodies. We really need a partnership with our medical practitioners. And there are lots of them out there who want to have that partnership.
And I always say that when we do the medical gaslighting show, when we do the mysteries, just like with the doctor who treated Ailey, there are great doctors who are committed to helping you find those answers. Right. But at the same time, we should not be ashamed if you have chronic fatigue and you don't have an answer. You shouldn't suffer in silence because there's not an immediate answer or someone makes you believe. And sometimes even our loved ones, you just need some rest.
Yeah,
sometimes they will put that on you.
And one of the things I try to capture in the book, the loneliest part of the experience wasn't just the suffering, but it was that sense that I could no longer trust my own perceptions about my very embodiment. And when people reflect back at you that there's nothing wrong with you, when you believe there is, it really distorts your entire sense of trust in yourself and the system. And it becomes very hard to get family members along with you because you don't have a name for the problem. Right.
So at its core, you're saying trust how you feel.
Trust and honor your own lived experience.
Meghan, as I said, a New York Times bestseller for a reason. The book is The Invisible Kingdom. It is available wherever you buy your books. And Tam Fam, you are all going home with a copy of Meghan's award-winning, celebrated, empowering book for us to speak up for ourselves. We'll be right back. Thank you.